Greetings to everyone. Welcome to Datagaps webinar. I am Pooja Gupta, Growth Marketing Manager at Datagaps, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Today in this webinar, we will understand how Datagaps DataOps suite with its generative AI capabilities empowers data-driven organizations to build robust pipelines with validation transformations and open AI LLM integration. On the panel today, we have David Small, VP of Sales at Datagaps, and Shubhanshu Dikshit, our Product Manager at Datagaps. So here is our agenda for today's webinar. A quick overview of Datagaps and DataOps suite, which will be followed by how DataOps suite helps build robust data pipelines using GenAI capabilities, thereby ensures accuracy and consistency. Next, we will talk about Datagaps DataOps suite supporting different ETL architectures. Thereafter, Shubhanshu will share DataOps suite demo, where he will share how our platform simplifies data quality monitoring and data masking with its GenAI capabilities, ensuring high reliability of data. In the end, we will discuss about real-world case studies and success stories, which will be followed by a Q&A session. We have included a couple of polls which will reflect in the middle of the session, and we would like to request every attendee to share their feedback by answering poll questions. Now I hand this over to Dave, and Dave, stage is all yours.
Thank you, Pooja. That's well, and it's a pleasure being able to speak with people about Datagaps, first of all, but also, the hottest topic on the planet, Gen AI. Right, it's you see the news programs and it's on the news. It's just really permeating every place. And so what we thought we'd do is there's a lot of promise in OpenAI or Gen AI, but there's also pitfalls and there's some downside of things. So what we thought we'd start with today is really our commitment to embedding Gen AI into Datagaps software, into our DataOps suite. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that the data privacy isn't impacted. So we provide various approaches to Gen AI to protect the data from unintended exposure, and we continue to keep that commitment. We've done that prior to Gen AI, and we'll continue to do that as we explore ways to bring Gen AI's capability into the DataOps platform to make certain tasks that much easier. Security as a first approach. There's a lot of good things you can do with Gen AI, and there are some things that some of the individuals out there are trying to use Gen AI to perpetuate some kind of illegal activities and such. So we take security very importantly, and so we take that security first approach. We also want to make sure that we're complying with the laws that are coming out and on top of the laws that are coming out, but also not just stop there, but really to listen and apply industry acceptable standards for how AI is being used. So we're very cognizant of the fact that that there needs to be some kind of compliance, and not everything that AI can do or Gen AI can do, not all of that makes sense to take advantage of. Our approach for looking at Gen AI and Datagaps DataOps suite is to do continuous enhancements in the areas of finding things that we can help alleviate some time and effort by generating test cases or code. Also, the ability to what we have already in the product, and maybe SQL statements or JavaScripts or things like that, have the ability for Gen AI to explain what those things are doing, and then potentially fix those things. So if we have SQL in our applications, and that SQL is not properly formed, or if it's long running, you can certainly ask Gen AI to fix that and try to incorporate that, or fix the validation errors that we find through Gen AI. We are very collaborative in our approach to things. We love to collaborate with the clients and industry experts. We get a lot of good ideas, and a lot of direction is developed based upon our collaboration with our clients and our partners. So why or what is the need to have Gen AI in a product that does end-to-end testing? Well, we've spent millions of dollars putting together your data analytics platform, your data warehouse, your data lakes, and you have a data pipeline that needs to be tested. We've spent millions testing our applications, but not nearly enough in terms of testing the data pipeline that creates your data warehouse and your data analytics platform. A lot of times that's done through a manual process, and it's time consuming. And quite frankly, when you do a manual process, you miss things. So if you can incorporate Gen AI into the overall process, you can improve some of the bottlenecks, even in the manual testing. So it's time consuming. There's a lot of times people use scripts as their approach. And oftentimes people are talking to us about the fact that they have limited coverage. So they don't test all of the ETL processes, or they don't test all of the data, or they don't test all of their data analytics reports and dashboards. They test a fraction of that. And so even in an automated means, if you're using automated tools, there's areas where Gen AI can help improve and cut down on the amount of effort it takes to do the testing and to implement the test cases and such. So this is a typical pipeline. This is what we talk a lot about. We, as a company, do a wide number of things, from the point as data is coming in from a variety of files. Could be your production applications. You could be using an API to call. Could be flat files, JSON, and so on. It doesn't really matter to us, but people oftentimes want to understand in general what that file looks like. And the simplest way to do that is through data profiling. And we not only profile the data and give you 20, 25 different metrics on each of the data elements in your particular file coming in, but we also keep track of prior profiles. And if those prior profiles and the current profile don't match, or there's some discrepancies, we alert you to that fact. Now, data rules, more granular way of testing data, very specific to data elements, and it could be for null counts. It could be for, hey, this number needs to be between this and this, or it can't be, it should be in this domain, and all kinds of those data rules get created. Those data rules roll up to our data quality monitoring. So we actually score those data rules at the data element level, and those scores are at the data element level. They roll up to the table level, to the model, to the warehouse, if you like. And we provide the ability for monitoring those scores, and they begin to diminish. Then what we do is we alert you to the fact that that score has diminished. We also do the ETL validation, so we independently test your ETL process to make sure that your expected results are what you're actually getting. And then finally, we do BI validation, regression testing. We compare data from reports that get rendered back to the source. There's all kinds of tests that we run within those areas. So the two areas that tend to be a little bit time consuming would be in the data rules generation, the ability to create rules based upon Gen AI. We've added that to the product and technology. And another area that was time consuming is if you're going to independently validate your ETL process, you have to recreate that ETL process. And recreation of that ETL process sometimes takes a period of time. Well, we've solved that by implementing Gen AI. So Gen AI can take a mapping document and actually create the transformations and enrichments that mimic your ETL process, and then we do the comparison. So we see that as a tremendous time saver in terms of Gen AI and where we're adding Gen AI. As we progress and advance in our use of Gen AI, then you'll see other spots in this diagram where we're implementing Gen AI. So in terms of data quality rule generation, really what the first step, if you want to generate the data quality rule, then what you need to do is connect and identify the source file that you want to run data quality rules on. And so it could be, again, a flat file. It could be from an API. There's no limit as to what that might be. But once you've identified it and connected to it, we retrieve the metadata. So we have the column names, the formats of the column, and a variety of things. And we pass that to GenAI for it to generate data quality rules. So it generates those rules and it puts it in our framework for those rules to be executed. In terms of ETL testing, what you do is you create a mapping document, and the more precise and the more information you provide in the mapping document, the better GenAI produces in terms of the output of the test cases. So you create the mapping documents, you upload the mapping documents to DataOps Suite. It hands those off to GenAI, and it creates the automatic test cases for your ETL processes. So what it's doing is it's alleviating that time that it would take you to replicate that ETL process so that you can independently verify the results. Now, there's a lot of things that we're doing now. The first two that we're talking about are the generation of the ETL test cases from a mapping document, and then also generating data quality rules. But on the roadmap, our philosophy and what we're thinking is that there are other areas within the product that you might be able to generate code. And we're exploring a lot of those types of areas. And the objective is to cut down on the amount of time it takes in order to create the test and make testing more of a stable part of your overall architectural deployment. We also think that it can help explain certain things. So again, if you have complex SQL and maybe you have a tester that isn't as well versed in SQL, chat or GenAI can help explain what that SQL is doing. And again, as I mentioned earlier, potentially fix those problems. Then we're exploring further that the product or the validations and the anomalies that are found, how could we apply GenAI to actually fix those problems without there having to be a lot of human interaction? So with that, we think we can improve the accuracy of things, certainly increase efficiency, and continue to innovate to use the techniques and the capabilities that as GenAI continues to expand and LLMs continue to expand, being able to use them in an efficient and a proper way, but a responsible way for us to help people that need that data testing, that data pipeline testing. So with that, let me turn this over to Shubhanshu. And Shubhanshu, it's all yours. Thank you for your time.
So yeah, thanks a lot everyone who has come in to join us today. I'm very happy to actually announce these set of features, as these were long coming ever since we saw these particular tool sets come into play for the wider world back, say, last year or a couple of years before that as well. So yeah, there are two distinct aspects we want to cover. The first one is with regards to how our application can really help you ensure and you get that ETL testing done, especially when you're working with thousands of tables throughout an entire pipeline. And secondly, the other aspect of ETL testing, which is not just validation of transformation, but a step further than that, which is quality of the data sets as well. Finally, I'll quickly touch base on the masking aspects of our application. But to give you a very short summary on the architecture, just so we are very clear on this, the application can be installed onto your infrastructure, be it on-prem or cloud-based. And the main reason for this is to ensure that the application is compliant with your specific system. Your data sets are never going to leave your secured walled garden or your secure space, and we are always going to be installed behind your firewalls in a particular setting that we don't even get logs back. So from a compliance perspective, data sets remain with you, the test cases remain with you, everything specifically is behind your firewalls, including the AI model as well, more on that later. and you can choose how you'd like to work with it from that perspective. So yes, the one aspect I want to clarify is you don't have to worry. Your data sets are never really going to leave your system. But if you'd like to, we can host the application as well. For more details, we can have a discussion in person or at a particular dedicated demo on that. But now let's jump to the use cases. Of course, I do want to quickly touch base on what Dave has suggested earlier with regards to the sources that we're going to cover. And the main reason I'm doing this is that my demo is going to be very specific to just one or two of these sources, but I do not want to take away from the fact that the application can connect to all of the sources that you see on your screen right now. And since we are Apache Spark based, while it definitely helps up with processing and working with billions and trillions of records, as we have done with a good number of our clients, the main usage here of Apache Spark in this example is to ensure that you can basically replace any of the sources with the other systems. In my examples, if you see me use a SQL Server system, you can easily replace that with a Postgres system, Athena, Redshift, Snowflake, or even something which is file-based like JSON or XMLs as well. So now let's jump into the actual use cases. And from this point on, I'm going to use a very specific use case, which is a system where a business rule that we can define so that we can work with it. Now, the business example that I want to use includes a mapping file like this. So right now on your screen, what you have is a typical mapping file, although I would stretch the word typical, as a typical mapping system won't really have these many business rules associated on every row. In most cases, you're going to have just a few associations of joins in specific cases, as you see marked with the yellow highlight, and of course a few transformations typically in case when statements. But if you have aggregations, you'll also have the grouping conditions and other aspects present right there. So that's the one basic aspect. This is a typical mapping file, and as a QA tester or an engineer, you will definitely work with this kind of file or a file which is adjacent to this. So while you might not work with this exact format, you will still work with the same system which has the source files, the data types, of course, the rule that you're working with, and not to forget the target and their associations as well. From the perspective of an ETL mapping tool, this is pretty straightforward. So of course, you're going to use this, you're going to create the corresponding query, and you're going to work with it accordingly. But you're going to do this at a per transformation basis. Your targets are going to be in hundreds, and you as a data engineering team are going to sit together, work to them, and create the test cases specific to what you're going to work with. But now let's discuss the validation aspect. Now, well, from a validation perspective, you know exactly what you would like to validate. You want to ensure that, hey, in this particular case, is email address, if it's null, you want to remove it specifically. You just want to ensure that these corresponding data sets are not present. There are two ways to do this, and I'll go through two of them. But in other complex use cases, you would like to ensure that your aggregation, that your sum is also being done correctly. You have a joining condition as well as sum, and there are multiple places where this query can be incorrect. And the main aspect here is that this is going to be done across multiple tables throughout. You're going to have not just one mapping file, you're going to have hundreds of them. And so what we need is an automated system that's going to validate this, not just in terms of the actual transformational validation, but also the subsequent validation. So with this aspect set, let's discuss how you can easily work with this in our application. Now, I've done this a few times in my system already. That's why you see a good amount of test cases created specifically, but we'll create a brand new system live for this use case. And that's something that you might not really see a lot, that we are trying to showcase a GenAI example live. So this is a curated example. So I'm going to select my source and target. And as you can see, I have a multitude of sources, and the previous source screen is also an epithem to that. And now I'm going to import my mapping file. Now here I can import multiple mapping files. I'm going to stick to just one. Of course, the main aspect here is we want to start with a simple example. Then we would like to move ahead and go into much more complexities. But as of now, I'm going with a single mapping example. But as you see, as soon as I import this, it actually expects multiple as well. And what have we done? Well, in this particular use case, since we are working with a specific format, the application has understood what the source columns are, what the target columns are, what is the expected data type, so on and so forth. And from this point on, here's where GenAI comes into the mix specifically. So we're going to try to run this live, and what we're going to send is specific information on what exact query we need. Now, a critical factor here is, let's discuss what's happening in the backend. So in the backend, it depends on exactly what type of AI or LLM model you would like to work with specifically. Now, in this case, we are using an Azure OpenAI model, as it's created for more enterprise-specific data sets, while ensuring that the data that you send out to them is not really used for training. And that's a critical factor there, because a typical OpenAI connection is going to use the data. So Azure OpenAI is actually a substring of that, which does not really use the data for training, and thus compliance could be met in one specific way. Another aspect there is that in certain cases, if you're working with, say, Azure specific accounts, you can actually host your very own Azure OpenAI model, and that way everything remains within your walled gardens. If you're not on Azure specifically and say you would like to connect to Gemini, or if you'd like to connect to the Azure or AWS counterpart to that, we are creating the integration layers for those as well. That's the one thing that we like to keep our application as agnostic as possible. Right now, you can deploy the application on Azure or Google Cloud, and as well as AWS, as well as on-prem systems. And we want to ensure that the corresponding LLMs or AI assistants that we provide, these integration layers don't lock the corresponding user out to one specific platform. Of course, that's something we're working on. Right now, you can connect to 3 or 4 specific systems, and we are trying to create our very own LLM system as well. So that will be in-house, that will be shipped with the product. But as of now, as you can see, the application does do very well with the exact system as well. Now, let's assume you do not like the specific query. You see that, okay, there's something incorrect within this query. And I mean, if you actually go through the entire mapping document, you'll see that, okay, there might be something wrong. Of course, while I can choose to edit the query right here, an easier option for me, especially if I'm working with multiple queries and multiple specific aspects, is to just regenerate the entire set or specific queries right here itself. And the reason this regeneration aspect is pretty important is that it gives the end user a good amount of control over what they would like to do specifically here. And that's the key factor here. I want to ensure that the application has a good amount of control. What we're trying to add here are further prompts so that you can help the end user, so that the end user can actually push OpenAI assistants further there. But the main gist here is to help the end user create this set of queries altogether. And here we see that that's exactly what has been done. And again, there's no limitation to this. I can keep doing this as many times as you would like. Nothing exactly different. And of course, I can add multiple mapping documents as well. Now, once I have specifically done this, I can choose to preview and then move to the next step. So I think I clicked it once again by mistake. So let me just wait for the query to come up once again. And you'll notice that we've done what we've done for our source, we've done for our target as well right here. Now, before we jump into the preview, let's actually take a look at the query. If I look at preview, and you'll see that the green button here indicates that the application itself is going to try to run this query. So while we get the output from GenAI, anyone who has actually used that knows that, okay, sometimes it's not going to spew the most accurate query. So our application automates a good chunk of that, where we actually run the query that has been sent out automatically as well. And so we run it once, and that's hence you see the green icon there. So the source and targets have automatically picked up. The queries are working correctly. And even as just a quick glance says that, yes, we are correctly, aggregating our systems. We are also doing the joins on our correct column types and other aspects. And of course, the case when such statements are also correct, as you can see. A lot of things being taken care of by default. And this is one of the key factors where GenAI is particularly important. I mean, I'm showing this just for one specific mapping document. If you had to do this manually, someone with a good amount of SQL experience has to come into the system, create this query specifically, and then run around with it. And they have to do it multiple times, hundreds of times for all the specific mapping documents. In this case, all of this happens in a single get-go. The main reason we are going with a complex use case right here with just a few simple joins here, I mean, this can be considered as mid-complexity, is that to emphasize that, well, most of your mapping documents are not going to be this complex. The main aspect here is to increase the productivity. So if you have 100 mapping documents, you can send out 100 of them here. Of course, for about 70 or 80 of them, the mapping document is going to be generated. Queries are going to be generated correctly. You'll get a notification of that as well. And in case there's some issues that the generative AI system faces with regards to specific queries, or if there are critical KPIs and systems you would like to focus on, you can, of course, go into that specifically and either work on it manually or then work on it with additional prompts. Well, from this point on, everything is pretty straightforward. Now that we have created our source and target query, we can just compare them one against the other. And that exactly goes to what we're trying to work with specifically here, is that the application is trying to boost and holster the specific use cases that we're trying to work with regards to multiple mappings. I see there's a hand raised, but the way we are working with this webinar is that we're going to keep the questions towards the end. Feel free to actually use the Q&A portion to actually send the questions there, and I'll be happy to answer them once we are done with the aspect of this and the subsequent topic we want to cover. Sorry about that. All right, now let's jump to the other aspect. Of course, if you ever used our product before, from this point on, it's pretty straightforward. The application has inherent capabilities with regards to migration validation, and migration validation automation has always been one of our key factors. So usually you would have data sets like these where the problem statements were much more, let's say, traditional. And when I mean traditional as well, if you're moving from an on-prem system to a cloud system, assume SQL Server to Snowflake, you're going to have data type mismatches. Your column names are not going to match. The column orders between your data sets are not going to match. And of course, the number of columns between your source and target might not match as well. All of these things and more are automatically handled within the application already. GenAI is just going to be one more added factor to really boost the productivity of our end users, as we have done for a good number of our clients. For one specific client, we have reduced their testing time from months to days, and of course, substantially reduced the size of their QA testing team in that manner. So the QA testers there who are data engineers as well can now actually focus on data engineering specifically, instead of basically working double time as QA testers and on specific use cases there. So boosting productivity is what our main focus here is. Now here you will see the mapping has been done automatically. If there were columns which were not mapped, you would have seen them right there. And if there were columns which are almost mapping, in the sense that, well, here we are working with birth_date, and here we are working with the exact same column names. But even if the target column names were different, we had birth_date, or if we had a suffix, prefix, and a lot more things added, the application would have still handled all of those things inherently. So all of these things done automatically. Now we go next. And then as you can see, the options, this is again something that we have covered multiple times in a lot of our previous demos as well. This is a full data comparison, which takes care of, as I discussed earlier, data type mismatches, column name mismatches, everything in between, and gives you a great amount of options to work with as well. And from this point on, you can generate this test case. And again, once again, we work with a single mapping. So you see a single test case, but the same thing can be used for hundreds of test cases as well. And this is the automatically generated test case where we have done this thing already. We have run all of these things again. And since I have already created this beforehand, I can just use one of the existing use cases there just to illustrate the point further. So here we go. And here we see that, yes, the source query has been automatically pulled in. That's what we see right there. The target query has also automatically pulled in. And here we see that, well, between our source and target, there are a lot of mismatches between our system, and the application has caught that. A complete illustration on the entire system from this point on. Again, this we can cover in our actual definite demo when we want to discuss something specific as well. If you're looking at something specific as this, where this is a typical system where you would like to apply this, you can also add a lot of other factors after this, such as Jira ticket creation, Teams notification systems, pushing reports, and a lot more. So we'll park that for a specific demo if needed, but we can have a discussion later as well. For our discussion at this point, what we have basically gone through is this particular mapping file. Sorry about that. Yeah, this particular mapping file has been drawn through the system. And what we've basically done is that we have recreated the logic using GenAI in this case, and we are comparing our sources and targets. In this particular way, we ensure that, yes, our ETL transformation is actually correct. So that's part one. But the story is not over, obviously, because again, this is something that definitely comes by. And even if you can do this for hundreds of columns and say hundreds of data sets in that manner, the story is not over as well. You're not done with the validation of data, because here you might not see simple test cases. Well, okay, if this is a primary key, well, but if it's a primary key, we need to ensure that this is a unique key. If you're working with a geography key, we need to ensure that it comes from an existing list of geography keys. If it's a title, or if it's some kind of name concatenation, you still need to ensure that, well, there are no special characters in it. You need to ensure dates are within specific formats and specific systems, and a lot more. So what I'm getting into at this point is data quality validation. While your mapping document is a very good way to understand these specific aspects, it might not exactly cover the exact set of rules you want to apply on each and every column. And you need to apply rules on each and every column and every row to ensure that your data is being validated on every front. While we do have a good amount of data quality monitoring tool sets that we use traditionally, here, once again, GenAI has played a very critical role in ensuring that from the end user perspective, we speed things up and enhance the productivity. So all the rules that I've just discussed, these are pretty straightforward rules that you might think of. And hey, if you have a data dictionary, you can probably have these rules there as well in one form or the other. But the creation of this rule is something that the end user always has to do. Now, within our product as well, we always used to work with something called wizards. So our rule creation process is pretty straightforward. And let me open up data quality monitoring just to illustrate this further. So, well, I've already created a good set of rules, and you'll see that, yes, we have models coming from different locations, and we have all the data quality scores being mapped up together. But here, to have a bit of a focus, you'll see that the rules that we have generated, and let's go to the DIM customer right there. These are all the AI generated rules itself, actually, that we're working with at this point. I've already done this a few times just to keep some examples ready. But the main gist here is that at this point, what we ask our end users to do is, hey, define your rule once. All the rules are importable and exportable and can be easily switched between data sets, between environments, and between multiple streams as well. So the way we actually push it as well, you got to define your rule at least once and then reuse it as many times as you would like. And this could be anything ranging from a typical metadata contextual check, which means just making sure you don't have nulls, you don't have duplicates on a composite key. Like I said, all the rules that I discussed earlier, but a bit more on that in terms of business rules. You want to ensure that the particular metric is above 0. You just want to ensure this has positive values. Maybe a bit more complex. Your sales figure, where they're never going to be below 10K, but they shouldn't really be about 15K as well. So that's if something is over that, well, some transformation or edge condition has failed between your transformation or the incoming data or your BI reports as well. Furthermore, things like ensuring that the orphan records are not present within your system, that parent-child relationships are consistent throughout, even if they are one-to-one or one-to-many mappings. So while you perform a great deal and much more here, you do have customizable rules as well with customizable operators. We can discuss that specifically in the QA section if we have to. But the main gist here is that we ask our end users to define these rules at least once before they can parameterize them, and of course, reuse them and import them, export them, and reuse them as many times as you'd like. And to do this, we actually have a proper wizard as well. So if you want to define a rule case, you can do that as you see right there. You can define exactly what type of rule you'd like to run with and exactly what the data sets and other columns you'd like to run with. But of course, our focus today is on the generative AI rule. Now here, right now, we have a prompt. In our upcoming release, what we're adding is, of course, the upload document as well, similar to how we can upload the Excel. We want to have that mapping document or a data dictionary format that can be uploaded as well. And after that, well, if you want to, you can definitely put up a prompt. Now, I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to put a basic prompt here. Like I want about 20 DQ rules that cover accuracy and validity. Let's be grammatically correct here. And then I get to choose exactly what columns and data sets I would like to work with. Now, of course, I can go in and select the entire data set as well. But for the sake of illustration, let me just go in and just be a little more specific here. So let's pick up customer type, customer key, title, a couple of name columns, maybe the date column as well. Let's pick up gender, yearly income, and I think that's good enough for DIM customer. Let's go to account, or maybe let's pick up DIM employee. Pick up a few ones here as well. So in this case, I can choose all the columns. If I'm going specific there with some specific context, I can choose that. Or if I'm uploading a data dictionary help, I can just select all of the rules as well. So again, it depends on entirely what you would like to go with. And we are giving the additional prompt system so that the end user can actually provide some extra information as well. From this point on, it's pretty straightforward. This particular system, the example that I'm using right now, currently we are connecting to the OpenAI Azure system. So that's what it's going to use. So what are we doing in the background so that we're crystal clear? We do not want to send data to anyone, so that's definitely there, unless we are working with our in-house model. More on that later. But in this particular use case, all we are sending is the metadata, the context. That, hey, these are the column names, this is the exact data type, and these are the type of rules we'd like to generate. Additionally, if I would have uploaded a mapping file or a data dictionary, well, that would have had all of this information as well, and we would have pushed that in this particular perspective as well. This is what we come with. And what you see right now is the first iteration. Of course, I can once again reiterate rules, fix up the set of rules that I'm working with if I have to. But what I've basically done at this point is taken a huge set of load off the end user and says that, hey, if you want rules, the rules are right here. All you have to do at this point is just review them. Because once again, these rules themselves can be easily parameterized and then reused throughout the system. The main aspect here is to boost productivity. And if you want to work with even simple use cases across your, say, 100 different variations in your data model or other aspects, the main aspect is, well, we want to boost it. So here we are ensuring that the end user has to validate the easy ones right there, the ones that you can think of. And if there's anything specific that's niche, well, you can use the GenAI creation to create those rules. You can also use our application to create those rules one time as well. Again, it's about using the best tool for the best specific use case. And what we have noticed is that 90%, or maybe let's say put the 80%, let's say apply the 80-20 rule. 80% of the rules you're going to apply are going to be pretty straightforward. The 20% rules are going to be the one which are niche or dedicated to your specific stream or domain or industry. So let's make sure that 80% rules are done within a few hours, or maybe, as you see, within a few minutes as well. Now, what I would like to go through are a few set of these rules. Now, of course, you can already read a few of them. We have a few set of rules which I would like to personally change as well. Perhaps the gender one, or maybe you would like to go for the first name. While the first name rule is pretty great, we are ensuring that it's only alphabets and other aspects. Depending on the industry, you might have to alter that. But again, we can easily go in, edit these rules if you would like to test them and work with them in that particular perspective as well. And what I've done is I've already run this rule set a couple of times. So as you see, I've run this rule for this particular use case where I've gone through a lot more columns and asked for a lot more rules. So here I see there's a good chunk of rules that I'm working with, as you can see right there. And this is ranging from a different variety. This is not just a simple unicity check. We have a lot more. We are ensuring that the birth dates are not in future. We are ensuring that the titles are not longer than a specific character length. We are ensuring that the value of our yearly income is not negative. We are ensuring that the birth date is exactly in past for another system as well. We are ensuring that, well, the last name is capitalized in the correct format. We are ensuring that the birth date is not null, and everything in between. Once again, this is a Pandora's box, and we want to ensure that the end user has a great amount of control over not just the process. Like, we don't want to give you just the end result. We want you to have some control on the intermediary steps as well. Hence the prompt, hence the access to the mapping files and the data dictionaries and other aspects as well. A few more examples on this front as well. I try to do this for some accountability systems as well. We get a similar type of use cases. And once again, depending on the prompts and the data dictionaries that you work with, your rule sets and other aspects are going to change. So yeah, what we have done together, let's go through what we have done at this point, because so what we want to really focus on is, well, the first aspect is, hey, we have done this for the entire file. So if I go back to my Excel file here, this is an entire ETL mapping system. And then depending on the expertise and depending on the experience of the QA tester or the data engineers working, well, this data engineer, this particular data engineering project of this particular mapping with the data quality assurance and creating the query and other aspects as well could take up at least a few hours at minimum, depending on the experience that they're working with, and of course the amount of documentation they are expecting and other aspects as well. And we have done this within the span of this webinar itself, and that too, with a specific set of use cases there while explaining the process. It really goes to show the productivity boost that the application provides. But the key pointers that I want to focus on is, firstly, we have done this for multiple rows and we have done this for multiple tables essentially throughout the system, all together in an automated fashion. And it's not, and these test cases are based on the documentation itself. We are using the documentation that's generated that many times people might not use specifically in QA or might use in QA manually. We are trying to push that to an automation stage. So now your documentation is pretty good for even QA systems. And then the final aspect is, well, ETL validation is one thing, but we are ensuring that after this ETL validation, you're still performing those data quality checks. And all of this is being done in a smooth ETL pipeline, ETL validation pipeline, which is basically powered by just this document alone. So that's basically most of the aspects that I wanted to cover here. Now, I'll just quickly touch base on data masking once, as this is one of the things that we did want to check. And so for that, I'll quickly get into my product of Test Data Manager, and I'll illustrate what we discussed with data quality masking. So here we do use a bit of ML and AI as well. It's more ML than AI, as AI is really needed here specifically, so to speak. But what we do is that, well, we understand that, well, in some cases, either you have a subset of the production data that you can use for testing your system, or you just have the data types and maybe a fake data itself that, hey, this is what the data is going to look like. Test the system, and well, you're going to have to ensure that your pipeline works for 1 billion records. But for testing, here's 1,000. And somehow you actually have to ensure that you're working with that particular data set and ensuring that your pipeline can actually manage that. It's not just about test cases, it's about scale and a lot more. So the two distinct use cases with Test Data Manager is, firstly, as you see, the application can easily pick up the models from the metadata itself. They're keeping track of the relations between tables as well. We definitely do that. And here's the first instance of masking coming into picture. You see here already I'm kept my full name, address, and other things masked. And the way I've done this is that the application has the ability to automatically detect PII data. Again, we just I don't have to even click it. As you can see, all of this thing is done automatically. And of course, I can go in and edit and create some specific PII columns as well. But this is what we have done basically. We are masking data right here itself, and this is something we are bringing from a dynamic perspective to our product as well. Of course, that's the first aspect. But say you want to work with it from the other perspective, which is, hey, I want to validate my pipeline, but I can't really use my production data in my testing pipeline. Again, I need to create the test cases, and I need to test my system at volume as well. So here's where you see the other aspect of creation of synthetic data from the get-go. Now here we have taken a few records from our system, and the application has automatically understood what exactly we are working with. We're working with a foreign key, we're working with a numerical system, we're working with categories, and so on and so forth. Of course, I can go into a specific system and choose, hey, if I want to create fake data from a specific formula, from a specific domain, from a specific composite key, I can do all of that. But if I'm working with zero amount of records, so say you get just the data dictionary and, well, the system, the manager's like, well, here, just make the entire system from it. You can create fake data from scratch, and it does not really depend on your exact system. We have a wide variety of domains where we get into, be it kind of infographic systems, be it systems in terms of, say, transport, logistics, maybe you're working with web data, maybe you're working with specific map data, or anything in between. And of course, this includes a bit of financial data sets as well. So the application can create fake data for you while maintaining all the cross relations that you're working with and a lot more. But with regards to masking, the application can do that. And of course, it's not tied into the product. If you want to create the synthetic data and then save it as a file in your system, use it for your own use cases, save it as a view in your table, all of this is permissible. We don't really lock our customers behind specific use cases or into specific templates. If you want to create the synthetic data, use it in specific use cases, you're feel free to do that. So yeah, that's the final aspect of our webinar. The only other aspect that we want to definitely discuss, and this is a side pointer, which again, as since I'm from the marketing and development team, I can definitely give a sneak peek on what we're working with as well. As you might imagine, we really want to work with from the integration perspective as well. The application already has a great amount of integration with, say, DevOps tools like Azure DevOps, creating Jira tickets automatically in case the test case fails, sending out Teams notifications, data enrichment, and a lot more. So there's a lot of integrations that we work with, like Jenkins, DevOps, and a lot more as well, Azure DevOps, and a lot more as well. But what we're trying to do is we're going to bolster this further. So a quick example here would be something that we're trying to create for the DBT system, where we actually keep track of the changes that you do within your DBT system, and based on the changes within your code, we try to create the test cases accordingly. So say, for example, you're working on a particular DBT code, or just basically transformational logic, and say you change it after a particular feature request comes in. The application understands the change and then creates new test cases just to ensure that the particular change has been done correctly. That's something that's in the works, and we would definitely like to show it in one of our future webinars as well. And that's DBT is just one of the use cases. We would like to ensure that we're agnostic from that perspective as well. The other integration that we're definitely looking into is from a data governance perspective. We already have an amazing case study and success story that we have with Collibra, where the application was capable of translating the rules that we got from Collibra into actual rule systems as well. However, we wanted to ensure that it's way more readable to the end user. So if someone from the data governance team wants to create a rule, they can just describe the rule as is, and the rule will be created and deployed within the application. Right now, the same thing works, except the language is a bit more technical. You still need to have a bit of knowledge of, and you need to understand a bit of templates that are being used. But we want to open that environment further so that if someone with even very little tech experience from the governance side as well can come in, define the type of rules that they would like to work with, and work with that accordingly. So yeah, that is a basic gist of what we want to cover, wanted to cover today. I'd like to firstly thank everyone's time for joining us here. And from this point on, I would like to take up a few specific questions if there are any. Let me just quickly check the QA section there as well. All right, I see there's a question. What are your inputs and application of data products for a utility provider? Well, I do believe we have a couple of clients from the utility sector as well. But primarily our aspect goes with the data sectors there. So our main aspect here, if you have a specific data stream in that particular system, and if you want to ensure either in terms of production level monitoring, where you want to ensure that the corresponding system, the pipeline you're working with, is being validated after each and every feature upgrade, after every transformation and other aspects that come in, because no ETL pipeline stays static for a very long time. Each and every quarter or each and every month, more realistically, you're going to have new changes coming to the system. So keeping track of the changes, keeping track of ensuring that the quality of the data and the BI reports that you're working with is still trustworthy, because at the end of the day, hey, it's the reports, it's those BI reports on which you actually make all your business decisions. And if you want to ensure that the data you see that is actually valid, well, that's where the application definitely comes in. And that's where Datagaps has been used prominently with a lot of our clients. One of the biggest pharmaceutical giants is actually a user of ours, as well as some great banks in the Europe sector. We also have a few clients from the Australian region, some New Zealand, and a lot more. So different industries use us for the same aspect, which is to ensure that the reports that they work with or the outputs of their data pipelines are actually valid. Because from that perspective, well, it's the most important thing, that the number you see in your report, it should be valid. So I would say from that perspective, yes, that's the main aspect of the application of Datagaps there. Of course, generative AI is the way we can boost this, but as a whole, since the question is more specific to Datagaps as a whole, our main agenda, the motive is to ensure that you can trust your reports and you can trust your data. All right. Is Gen AI generating data rules part of 14.42 or is it an additional price? Well, there's no additional price specifically. It's a feature, as you can see. The only quote unquote price I would think on this particular point is the connectivity to the corresponding model you would like to connect to. So in this case, if you would like to connect to, say, an Azure OpenAI model, then we would basically need those credentials there, the corresponding, the connection details there. So that has to be an existing connection. And that's the main aspect. Like you can host your very own generative AI system. We would like to connect to it specifically. So it's not an additional price, and if needed, we can have a proper discussion on pricing on this front. But from what I've understood, there's no additional price to this. These are features which will be rolled out within the product itself. Right. I think those were a few set of questions that we wanted to cover. All right, then over to you, Dave. Thank you.
Well, again, thanks everyone for attending the session. And really, let me sort of recap what we went through, right? So again, Gen AI is a very, very hot topic. And the real value that we see in Gen AI is that it gives you the ability to embed that in our case, our DataOps suite, to take care of things that were typically more time consuming. And so that's what we focused on first. So one of the things that tended to be a little bit time consuming, even though it's an automated and a wizard-based capability, was the data quality rules. So now using Gen AI, you can actually create the data quality rules and make that much, much easier than it was, than it is, and certainly over manual testing, but also even within the DataOps suite and using the wizard. So that's an advancement. So it's a trade-off between the two, right? You wouldn't want to do everything in Gen AI because some of those rules are easy enough or quick enough to do in the wizard as well, but it gives you some options there. The other thing we talked about was the process of validating an ETL pipeline, right? So, you create your ETL process, and there's all kinds of ways that little gremlins get into that ETL process. You might have changed some metadata. You might have brought in another file. You might have, a variety of things. And so people are more and more doing independent testing of their ETL process. Now, again, to independently test, you need to create the output that your ETL process is supposed to create and then compare it. That was a little bit time consuming as well. And so that's an area we focused. And, so it might have taken, hours to do the ETL test creation or the transformation test creations and stuff. Now it's down to minutes. And so that's a real time saver as well. So we're continuing to enhance the product with other ideas about what we can do to make the product either more efficient, easier to use, or provide more capabilities. And we love to get feedback from people. And if you have ideas, send them our way. For people that would like to see a little bit more of a specific demo of the overall Datagaps product and our DataOps suite product, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you. And from there, we actually create more of a customized demonstration for you. And from there, if you want to go into a trial or a POC, we provide that trial and that POC free of charge as well. So please reach out to us if you have some questions. And again, we greatly appreciate the time that you took to see our presentation today. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, so thanks Dave for DataOps suite understanding and Shubhanshu for an extensive demo. And thank you everyone for staying with us this whole time. If you have any query or you would like to have free trial, I have pasted the free trial link in Q&A chat box. And if you have any specific set of use cases to look at, our team can help you with a personal demo. You can drop a note to contact@datagaps.com. That's this email ID has been also pasted in the Q&A window. Thank you, everyone.